Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panmo TV. And welcome to this. I'll be with you in a minute. This is the 10th, or it's probably more than that actually, because some of the numbers are slightly different. But this is number 10 of the videos in which I talk to Rin Michaelis. And I'm talking to her this time about the Israel-Gaza situation and how it's perceived by various political spectrums in the West. Hello. Oh yeah. Oh, I just want to introduce you to someone. Hi, Nick. Come on, Ned. Hi, Nick. Look. Hi, Nick. Come on. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to come out. But anyway, that's Hynek. Now, Hynek is a cat. I think you can hear him in the background. He doesn't want to come out and meet everyone, unfortunately. But, all right, Hynek. What is a cat doing in my house? Well, if you go to my TikTok channel, you'll find no links. You know my TikTok channel. I won't put any links in the description box, anything like that. But I just uploaded a video explaining all about Hynek, about who he is and what is he doing here. Anyway, I'll see. What I'll do is I'll see if I can get him out again. Hang on a sec. He doesn't want to come out, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, that is Hynek. And go to TikTok, you'll find out all about him. So, with no further ado, let's go straight over. Go over to my interview with Rin Michaelis. You should be able to see, actually. See what
Oh, yeah, it does say recording started. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, sir. That's we should be rolling. There's usually some numbers appear next to the word recording, and that's not happening. But there they are. There they are. That's it. How are you? So, Rin, hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm interested to talk to you again. I mean, it's only a couple of weeks since we did a really good show about UFOs, so now it's good. What do you want to do this? What do you want to talk about this time?
Okay. I wanted to talk about the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and why some people are supports Palestine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because well, for starters, I don't even really feel like it's a left-right issue because there are ANCAPs. If you go to anarcho-capitalism, they are highly against APAC. And I know that Nick Fuentes and you pointed out that Mark Collette,
Hmm.
they're both very critical of Israel and they're right wing.
Yeah, it's interesting how this is divided. First of all, I don't know about the United States, but in my country, it's a bit like being in Merseyside when Liverpool and Everton are in the FA Cup final. And I mean, that might not mean much to you, but British viewers will understand exactly what I'm talking about. And the equivalent for the United States would be when, for example, there are two, maybe I forgot what the teams are, but there's the Texas Longhorns or the Green Bay Packers. I think they're rivals. If they're in the Super Bowl together, there's a kind of there's a massive rivalry. There's an entire culture of rivalry built up about that. And certainly in this country, it seems that the first thing people do when almost now is when they introduce you, they say, "Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the Israel or the Palestinians?" That's kind of where it's been split, and it's very polarized. I found that if you make any statement of sympathy for either side in this particular conflict, you'll be accused of being the most extreme advocate for the opposite side. You
Oh,
will.
that is so
I'm not
true.
kidding.
That is so true. That is so true.
Hmm.
Like there's this guy. He and I don't want to name names. I don't want to name names and start some controversy. But there's this guy. We have been, Twitter friends or Twitter mutuals all the way back since like 2017. But like he accused me of being a Hamas terrorist supporter. So, yes, so I blocked him. Like, because it's like there's a difference between disagreements, like we have our disagreements, but it's like this guy has been my mutual all the way back since like 2017. He's just going to call me a Hamas terrorist supporter. And for me, it's like that crosses the line. And I
Yeah.
blocked him. I did warn him. I did warn him, like, please stop. I told him, please stop, or I will block you. Like, please stop this. I am not a Hamas terrorist. And saying things like calling a person a terrorist supporter, that's the sort of thing that could potentially get somebody fired. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It could potentially get you fired. To me, it's equally as bad as falsely accusing somebody of being a neo-Nazi, because when you falsely accuse somebody of being a neo-Nazi or skinhead, that's the sort of thing that could get a person fired. So if you call me a Hamas terrorist supporter, what you're saying to me is that you want to get me fired from my job, so I blocked him to disassociate from that.
I don't blame you. I mean, you're absolutely right. In this day and age, expressing opinions on social media can jeopardize you in your life in many, many ways with the world of cancel culture. And I'm speaking as someone who has actually suffered in this way myself. I was a hospital porter for 23 years. It was something I loved and cherished. It was a part of who I was. And I was really very unceremoniously kicked out because of basically the work I do, the blog I was keeping, and things like that. So, absolutely, this is a very real danger, and it's actually libelous to do that. What that man did to you, and I don't blame you for blocking him. It's libelous to say that someone is a terrorist supporter because they express sympathy for a situation, or they have partisan emotions for a particular foreign conflict or any conflict. And
Yeah,
go on.
Yeah, to me, like calling me a Hamas terrorist supporter is kind of a lot like that could get somebody fired from their job. Like a job could look at it and like, oh, is that really true about you? And the thing is, this guy, he's not even left wing, obviously, because it's usually right wingers that support Israel. But I also find it hypocritical because this guy, used to be on Twitter saying like you can't go around falsely accusing people of being a neo-Nazi because they could get fired from their job. You cannot falsely make that false neo-Nazi because you could get a person fired. You could jeopardize their life. And it's like, aren't you being a hypocrite? And
Yeah.
speaking of hypocrisy, another thing that I find hypocritical is that remember 2016 how so many anti-SJWs were making fun of Anita Sarkeesian because Anita Sarkeesian would say everything's racist, everything's sexist, everything's homophobic, everything's transphobic, and you got to point it all out.
Who
And
could
even
forget
like
Gamergate? Yes.
and like Lacey Green would say, literally everything is problematic. You got to point it all out. But then, here is like neocons, because it's not all of the right wing. It is neocons, which is the largest right wing group, going like everything's anti-Semitic, and they need to point it all out. Like it's basically, like how Anita Sarkeesian is like everything's racist, everything's sexist, everything's homophobic and transphobic, and you got to point it all out. For neocons, literally everything is anti-Semitic. You got to point it all out.
Oh God, yeah. It's it's pathetic. It really is. And I mean, um, I'm interested actually in this. You mentioned it's a left-right issue. In your country, the United States. I remember you. I was quite surprised when you told me this, but you believe that it is the left wing in the United States tends to back the Palestinians, and it's the right that backs Israel. Is that right?
Yeah, generally, like you could look at polls, and if you want me to, I could try pulling up a poll if you want.
Yeah, sure. You can see the share screen button at the bottom. Are you able to use that?
Yeah, but I'm not on the page right now. I had to type it out. So you could talk like type it out.
If you post it in the private chat, I will share it. If I'm the only one who can use the button,
Um,
because I'm interested in this, because I think this is a transatlantic divide here, because Britain's a bit different. Carry on. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's gonna take me a while. That's the reason why I said like you could talk while I
Don't
type.
worry. Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the position in Britain while you're doing that. There does seem to be some kind of like demographic or yeah, politically demographic trends here. Now, they're not universal, of course, but what I found is that supporters of the Palestinians tend to be on the far left. Obviously, this is almost all of the Muslim population or on foreign immigrant population here, or those who are related to earlier generations of foreign immigrants. They're almost virtually pro-Palestinian. But there's also a distinct far right here in Britain, which is pro-Palestinian. I mentioned Mark Collett. He's a good example. Oh, it's Israel. You've got something. Oh, yeah, I see it now, Rin. Here you go. There we go. Um, right, I see U.S. adults. Could you explain this to me, Rin?
Let's see. Hold on, let me scroll up a little bit. Half of US adults say that the military response from Israel in the Gaza Strip has gone too far, up from November. Okay, so this is people who think that Israel has gone too far. Let's see, all US adults, it would be 50%, but this is from January 25th from 2024. Democrats, with Democrats, it's 63%. With independents, it's 52%. And with conservatives, it's 33%.
Right, so that's interesting. It does seem to be a majority, although among the if you support the GOP, it's going to be lower. Democrats more. Independents are about the same. It looks like as the US generally. And is the 15% and is the light blue? Sorry, and don't know. Is that uncertain? Oh, I see it is.
Um,
Yes, and let me just look a bit closer. It's very small for me. Probably viewers can see this better than me.
yeah, I
Not
could
gone
read it.
far enough. Sorry, not gone far enough. And the dark green is just about right. Okay, I see.
Yeah, I could probably read it a bit better than you. The light blue is not gone far enough, which is 9% for Democrats, 12% for independents, and 24% for Republicans. And been about right would be 41% for Republicans, 28% for independents, and 24% for Democrats. So, what I've noticed is that independents and Democrats look really similar. Like,
Hmm.
independents are closer to Democrats than they are to Republicans.
Yeah, and there are two categories. I can see these are dates. So there are two lines on each of these polls. So what do the dates mean? So I'm only saying this. I know viewers can see this, but I can't.
The dates, the top one would be January 25th, 2024. So that was very early this year. And the bottom dates is November the 2nd, 2023, because it's like,
Hmm.
when the war first started, the majority of Americans supported Israel when the war started. But as the war continued, the many Americans, particularly the Democrats and the Independents, turned against Israel.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting that the opinion has shifted slightly away, somewhat away. I think it could be because it has gone on a long time and in casualties have increased. So I think there was an idea that this could all be done in a couple of months. I mean, many wars have said this. Wars are always predicted to last much shorter than they were. For example, in 1914, when the British Expeditionary Force went over to Belgium, this was the war that would be over by Christmas. But it didn't. It lasted for four more Christmases, almost a fifth one, and by the end of it, 18 million people were dead. So that was the Great War, and so this is often the way. And now it's been going on now for over 6 months, 7 months now, 8 months, and it seems that the hostages have either, I know some of them have been killed recently. There was some news that some of the hostages have been killed. A few of them were willingly returned, but only a very few have actually been captured alive. I found there's a couple of news stories about Israeli troops rescuing hostages, but have you heard many of those?
No, I haven't.
It's mostly there was a deal at one point in which Hamas handed over a number of the children. I think they handed a number of the children over, and then there was a couple who were killed. I mean, Hamas did say that they would kill the hostages if they were attacked, and unfortunately, probably they killed these hostages in the military engagement, as they promised to do. But it hasn't been very successful. Now, the question is how much longer is this going to go on for? Because at the moment there's a lot of suffering going on. Obviously, the suffering has now switched into the Gaza Strip itself. The original attack, of course, was against Israel by Hamas, but the casualties now are primarily Palestinian, and they're in Gaza. And we're now talking about this. There's going to be an invasion of Rafah, but Rafah is on the far southern end of the Gaza Strip, and the people, a lot of Gaza is full. Rafah is already full of refugees from the rest of Gaza, because the Israeli military have been basically clearing the northern cities. So, oh bless you. So
Thank
where
you.
the question is, we're now at a point where the people of Rafah don't really have anywhere to go, because Egypt will not open its borders to allow them through. Egypt has very minimal. They've allowed some aid convoys into Gaza, but they're not allowing anyone to leave. They don't want any Palestinian refugees in their country. So the question is, how much longer is this going to last, and how is it going to end?
I, I don't know how long it's gonna last. The reason why I felt like it could have been ended quickly is because think about how small and tiny Israel is in the Gaza Strip. The let's see, Israel, it's about the size of New Jersey. Israel is
It's
such a large country. Israel is the size of New Jersey. And the Palestinians, like for the most parts, they're not fighting back, even to the acknowledgments. And I posted this on Twitter yesterday. Even to the acknowledgments of IDF reservists, there are people who actually serve for the IDF and they went to her RS and they're like, yeah, you don't really see Palestinians attacking us. You see like us attacking them, but you don't really see, the other way around.
yeah. I don't think there's much they can do. See, 'cause, well, the Gaza itself. You mentioned how small Israel is. Israel is a small country, and indeed, New Jersey's. It's about the size of Wales, the smallest or the second smallest of the UK constituent countries, the smallest in mainland Britain. And the Gaza Strip is it's roughly the size of Greater London or the Isle of Wight. It's really small. It's about the size of of a big city, and there's a large number of people. It has I think its population is 900,000, something like that. And so this military action by the IDF is taking part in a very densely populated area, and civilian casualties have been high. And I know the Israelis are always saying, and indeed people like Douglas Murray are always saying, that Israel is attempting to minimize that kind of lateral damage. But I know a lot you don't believe that.
No, no, for a long list of, reasons. It's why in a way it's kind of hard to talk about because how do you talk about it without having an 8-hour live stream? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
how do I talk about this without making this live stream 8 hours long?
Mm.
Because there is just way too much to unpack, because there would be YouTubers that would talk exclusively about the conflict, and they would have like 30 videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I've seen a
Yeah.
few of them. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Have you heard of Hasbara?
is this Is that the no? That's not the one. Is that the original exodus of Palestinians?
No,
Okay,
that's called the Nakba.
Nakba.
The
That's it. Yeah.
Nakba is the original exodus of Palestinians. Have
Yeah.
you heard of Hasbara?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna go to an Israeli website. Because it's like Israelis are very honest about this. Like, at least when you go to Israel in an Israeli websites, basically it almost feels like a far right trope, but basically it's about lying to, Westerners. It just seems like a far right trope, but let me just
Right.
screen share. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's like it really is like, oh yeah, lying to Americans is a good thing, basically.
Well, I mean, I think in international diplomacy, it's almost entirely there's a lot of lies and manipulation. I see it. Here we go. Right.
Um,
The word Hasbara. Pretty right. What's this? Where is this from? 972 magazine. Is this Israeli?
Yeah, this is an Israeli magazine. It's like
Mm,
I have used the word Hasbara pretty freely recently, and so and so do more and more people without stopping to explain what it actually means. The use of this term has been widespread in his Israeli Hebrew for many years now, usually with a usually with a positive meaning. Though
mm,
not always in a positive context, there is a never ending debate on the failure of Hasbara. Yet I often wonder how many people outside Israel actually know it, let alone understand what it stands for. So here are a few words on Hasbara. Hasbara is a form of propaganda aimed at an international audience primarily, but not exclusively, in Western countries. Mm. It is meant to influence the conversation in a way that positively portrays Israeli political moves and policies, including actions undertaken by Israel in the past. Often, Hasbara efforts includes a negative portrayal of Arabs, especially of Palestinians.
right. Well, I mean, I've never heard that word before, but of course I understand what that means because I've seen it. I've actually seen this on both sides of this divide being used against each other by the enemy, and it's very common that a country will try to manipulate others to create alliances. And there's many ways of doing this, and it's often been used through history. And you could say it's extremely dishonest, and it is. And it would be, for example, just making us look good. I mean, and there's lots of people who will believe it, and they will become like what's the word? They will become like sympathetic to your cause. So I think this is a standard tactic in diplomacy. I don't agree with it. I think it's dishonest and it's wrong, and I would never be a part of it. But unfortunately, it often happens.
Yeah, can I read more of it?
Yeah, of course.
The Hebrew meaning of the word hasbara is explanation. The term propaganda has a different word in Hebrew. I believe that the popular use of this term also reflects a widespread public notion that a better efforts of explaining Israel's actions to the world would generate better understanding of Israel's policies and more international support. Less common use of the word to explain was also used with welcoming someone was used in the past by tourism ministry and campaigns urging Israelis to show hospitable approach to tourists.
Yeah. Do you want to carry on? Yeah, this would be so. For example, I know that the Israeli Foreign Service has various organisations. You mentioned APAC. You mentioned APAC a couple of times, which is the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee or something. And there's also there's one here in Britain which is called the Friends of Israel, and they will actually, they do actually, what they'll do is they'll go to MPs and they'll give MPs tours of Israel, all expenses paid, and put them in nice hotels, and they'll show them the nice bits and keep them away from the poor areas of towns and things like that. And they will then send them back to Parliament saying what a wonderful country it is. And indeed, this goes back a long way because, you know, when the Soviet Union first started, they would bring trade unionists from Britain and from other parts of the world into the Soviet Union and show them the workers' paradise. But they would show them showcase areas that were literally theme parks where, you know, everyone was well fed and everyone was smiling, and they were deliberately keeping them away from other places like the collective farms where people were starving and things like that. It doesn't surprise me they're doing this. I mean, they have the resources to do this, and I think all nations do it, and I think it's wrong. I think it's immoral, but they do it.
Yeah,
It's a kind of, it's almost like a kind of, it is a technique used in warfare as well as in peace.
yeah, because I remember V talking about it. Do you remember V?
Mm.
Do you
He used to
remember
talk like
V?
this. He's a Romanian man who talked like this.
Yeah, that's V.
That's him.
Yeah, the Romanian guy. He said that he was Romania lived under communism, and what they would do is that they would take, foreigners to the really, really nice, great parts in Romania, like
Mm.
they don't have the royal trim. They'll be at the good parts of Romania, while everybody else, would be at the horrible parts in Romania. They will be
Mm.
like in the poor areas. And like, so it's kind of like when you're taken to the good parts, you would think like, wow, communism works. When really communism does, or it's kind of like, I think Cuba also does this, where in Cuba, you would be in the good parts of Cuba,
Yeah.
and it's like you think communism works, but no, you are actually in the good parts of Cuba. You got to stay away from the bad parts where everyone is suffering.
Exactly, and indeed, they would use all. Sometimes they would go as far as they would get some of the guys over. I mean, Christopher Hitchens and Peter Hitchens did this. In Cuba, they would actually make sure there were plenty of like attractive young girls to seduce them, and they would end up they would end up having kind of like a lot of casual sex and things like that. They would use vice is often being used in this Hasbara method. It has, whichever
Mhm.
country it is, they will always give you good food. They'll always give you like plenty of drink, and if you're the kind of person, who has this weakness, they'll provide you with narcotics or with with sex, with prostitutes. Um, so yeah, they have ways and means of doing this. Of course, this is intelligence. This is also in intelligence as well, like a method of espionage. I want to talk a little bit later. I want to bring up something else about espionage, but that's an interesting thing. I wanted to just ask you: have you finished with this particular bit, Ren?
Oh, oh, no, it's a really short article. It's actually pretty
Hmm,
short, so I think we could finish it up because of how short it
go ahead.
is.
Go ahead.
Hasbara presents only one side of propaganda. It's mostly aimed at foreign audience. Yeah, mostly aimed at foreign audience. And I think
Mm,
that this is an important part. It may not seem important, but I think that it is important because this is why I read like Israeli press actually. Like I read Haaretz and whatnot
mm,
because Hasbara is actually much more to use to manipulate a foreign audience. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would be the points of manipulating your own people? You know what I'm saying?
mm. Well, a lot of Israelis can see through it, you see, because is contrary to popular belief, you know that the Ashkenazi Jews of Israel are not united at all behind their government. They
Oh,
haven't been. They haven't been for several years, many years now. There's been a lot of internal dissent and upheaval in Israel.
I know that. Like in
Mm,
Israel, there would be like thousands of Jewish people on the streets demanding that Netanyahu would resign. So it is weird that in American press, and like Netanyahu is portrayed in a very positive light, particularly like people like Ben Shapiro, where Ben
Mm.
Shapiro will portray Netanyahu in a very flattering, in a very positive light. Meanwhile, in Israel, there would be like so many, like thousands of people in the streets demanding that Netanyahu would resign because they believe that he's bad for Israel. And it's not just the people, there are even like people in the government, like there's like Benny Gantz and, Gallant, where Gallant was like, Netanyahu needs to go ahead and finish up this war because, Gallant think that Netanyahu is a terrible leader.
Yeah, I wonder if it's. I'm sure this has occurred to many people, and I'm going to give you an example in a minute. But this is as this war, this war, not just the retaliation in Gaza, but the original assault by Gaza on Israel has been very beneficial to Netanyahu's administration. Very
Yeah,
beneficial indeed.
Yeah, because it is widely believed that Netanyahu, and I think that even Gallant said it. Like Gallant issues, Israel's uh, Israel's defense minister. I think that even Gallant, and even some Israeli magazines are like, "Hey, Netanyahu only cares about his political survival." No.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, do you want to finish this off? Do you have anything more to add on this article, Rin?
Oh, this article is very short, so yeah,
Sure.
let's go ahead and finish it off. Um, the use of the Hebrew term Hasbara is a critical context rather than propaganda or public diplomacy. Da, 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 da. It's necessary because Hasbara efforts are wider and their goals are much more ambitious than any similar activities taken by all democracies and most non-democracies. Hasbara targets political elites. Hasbara
Yeah.
targets political elites, opinion makers, and the public simultaneously. It includes traditional advocacy efforts as well as more general appeals made through mass media. And it is carried out by government agencies, non governmental organizations, lobbying groups, private citizens, students, journalists, bloggers.
Oh, yeah. They certainly are. Yeah, they certainly are doing that.
Um, the Israeli government encourages the Israeli government encourages all its citizens to actively engage in Hasbara. Okay, recently it's even distributed brochures with talking points to all Israelis traveling abroad.
Oh my
It-
God.
it's just so ridiculously bad. You would think that you would find this in, Gav AI. It almost seems like a parody come to life, like you would think you would find this
Yeah.
as Gav AI. It is like, no, this is all real. Like, okay, recently it was even distributed brochures with talking points to all Israelis living abroad. A Hebrew web version of the campaign can be viewed here.
This is.
It's,
Can I just say that this is I think something I've never heard of before. Now, I know that Israel is a bit like Switzerland in that it has a citizen army. In other words, the IDF has essentially all the citizens who are able to serve are reservists. They are all reservists, especially the men. It used to be just the men, but there's many women now as well who are reservists, and even some of the old people are still listed as active reservists. And that's just like with Switzerland. Switzerland also has a citizen army. The difference is I've never heard of any country that has citizen spies. I've never heard of any country whose intelligence agency actively recruits its own citizens to act as essentially intelligence disinformation operatives.
yeah,
Never before have I heard that.
yeah, it's just shockingly bad. It's like, man, this
Yeah,
is just really shockingly bad. It's horrible.
it is. This is just a point. I mean, I'm not. I don't take a partisan position in this particular conflict. I feel sorry for all the individuals caught up in it.
Mhm.
But it has to be said that this policy has contributed enormously to the suffering in that entire region.
Yeah, it's true.
It
Like,
has.
there's this really a difference article that argued that Hasbara is actually bad for Jews. But like I don't want to spend too much time on Hasbara.
Sure.
But even though I don't want to spend too much time talking about Hasbara, a difference article, it's not going to be on this one, but how ours was like Hasbara is actually bad for Jews and it actually backfire against them.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's I in the end, you see this kind of like strategic persuasion in diplomacy. In other words, deception, disinformation. It it only lasts a certain amount of time before it's exposed, and then what happens is that the enemies will use the same strategy. The enemies will use the same tactic, and so it's only really, I suppose, if you don't descend to that, if you don't descend to that those rules of engagements in terms of psychological warfare, this will give the enemy an incentive not to do the same. You see what I mean? What happens in war, whether it's and I would include this kind of black diplomacy, this dark diplomacy as a form of warfare, is that the rules of engagement tend to be agreed on by the person who's willing to descend to the lowest common denominator. This is why nuclear weapons are so terrifying, because the moment one side uses them, the enemy will as well. You see, and this is essentially is kind of like psychological weapons of mass destruction. This Hasbara.
Yeah, yeah, like I would touch on what Haaretz says. Haaretz is a different Israeli magazine, and they kind of said somewhat similar to what you said. The biggest flaw of Hasbara is what if your interlocutor were to say, "I am not convinced." That's the biggest weakest of Hasbara is to say, "I am not convinced." Like
Yeah,
if you are just spreading, misinformation, if somebody's not convinced by what you have to say, then that's the reason why not husband, but Haaretz argued what would have been better for Israel would be to have good policies, that Israel would benefit so much more by having good policies instead.
definitely. I mean, if I'm not trained in diplomacy, I've never been a diplomat. But if I was in charge of some kind of foreign service, I would my instinct would be to behave straightforwardly, to be honest and straightforward with other people. That way, they'll be more likely to trust me. They'd be more likely to be honest with me. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly, because it's kind of a lot like, in a way, like you could almost see like an overlap of memes, in left wing circles and far right circles. And by far right, I mean like the American firsters. Like now, like the memes are overlapping because now Israel is seen as the boy that cried wolf. You know what I'm saying? The boy that cried wolf, because it's like, when you catch somebody in a lie, you start to wonder what else are you lying about.
Yeah. Is it all right to move on to a different subject, because I want to bring up something else?
Oh,
Are we finished with this, or do you want to carry on
oh,
and
yeah,
finish?
yeah. It's pretty sure we don't really have that long to go. We're near the
Sure.
end.
Yeah, yeah. Carry on with it. Yeah.
Um, Israelis are asked to engage in political oriented conversations with their host. Okay, which is bad. And contest abroad rather than discuss the Palestinian conflict. They are advised to cite Israeli technological achievements, mention environmental policies, and take pride in notable cultural works. The West Bank is to be discussed under its ancient name, Judea and Samaria, as a potential source marvel. Until a few years ago, the main government agency carried out such work has been Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs through its media and Hasbara department. It has a Hasbara department,
Yeah.
under Edom, Omar's governments, and much more under Netanyahu's, there was a considerable increase in Hasbara efforts. Okay. Mr. Netanyahu has launched for the first time a Hasbara ministry.
The Ministry of Truth. Yeah, as
Yeah,
Orwell would call it, the Ministry of Truth. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like 1984. It's like he has launched the first time Hasbara ministry. You have a literal ministry of truth.
Yeah. Mm.
Headed by a government minister. The current Hasbara minister is Lee Ugelstein. The Hasbara ministry includes a situation room which operates in 5 languages. It has a new media team that can reach, according to the office website's 100,000 volunteers on social media networks as well as, bloggers. Update: the Ministry of Hasbara is hiring
Oh, right.
advantage to minorities and representatives of the gay community. And
They
it's
probably have a
just
DEI policy.
oh my God,
Yeah.
it's so bad. And it's just so incredibly bad. It's like, what did I just read? What did I just read?
I know it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's yeah.
Yeah, it's just so bad. It's kind of funny. Like it's
Yeah.
so bad that you can't help but to laugh from it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Oh no, no, it names us what an organization. So I forgot it's like it's like Stand With Us, the Israel Project. It's like it just reaches levels of being shockingly bad to the
Mm.
point that you can't help but to laugh.
Yeah. It's extraordinary. It shouldn't be. It's not. It doesn't surprise me though, because I sort of knew this was going on. I've seen it going on already, but I didn't know it was called that. And I didn't. I had no idea it was so official. I had no idea they had this kind of organization. It was so kind of like organized and instituted deliberately as a strategy. I didn't know that, but I of course I knew there was propaganda going on. I knew, for example, I've been watching Douglas Murray, he's as far as I know he's an independent British journalist, but he's fanatically pro-Israel. He is to the point where he will become aggressive with anyone who disagrees with him, and he's things like that. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, that they're using these tactics doesn't surprise me at all. But I didn't know there was a ministry. I didn't know that it was had that name Hasbara, and it was a policy. Wow, there you go. Is it all right if I bring in something else, another point, Ren? Because I what I believe is I actually wonder if it wasn't for foreign influence, whether this kind of conflict would even take place. Would it even have taken place if it wasn't for it?
Yeah, was Ron Paul talked about that, and it was really pressing you because you would almost think that Ron Paul had a crystal ball. Like he was
Mm,
like like when it comes to Israel and the Palestinian conflict, he thought years back that we should have never gave so much tax dollars to Israel, that
yeah,
we shouldn't be seen, and he predicted the future because it's kind of a lot like, if they were to go to war and, American weapons are used in that war, it will make America look bad and act against America's best interest. And right now, not only are people complaining about Israel, people are also complaining about, America. People are also taking to the streets complaining about America as well.
yeah. I mean, the foreign influence is really extraordinary, and it goes back a long way. I mean, you see ethnic conflicts break out all over the world, and for example, there's them. I've been reading about the Myanmar civil war because the podcast of the Lotus Eater, Sargon's new program, he brought up this. It's also the Burmese Spring Revolution, the People's Defensive War, etc. And it's been going on since 2021. Now, these ethnic conflicts, what happens with these ethnic conflicts is they tend not to last too long if they're just people are left to themselves. So, for example, Uh, there's been various others around the world. But, I mean, you generally don't hear about them actually, unless there is some kind of foreign influence. But what happens is people will get angry. There'll be a dispute. They'll fight each other for a while, and they just kind of run out of energy. And then they either go back to the negotiating table, or they take a break for a while. Then they have another punch up. They have another fight. What happens? What happens with these ethnic conflicts is when foreign influence begins, they tend to last longer. They tend to go on, and it appears that the foreign influence actually drags it on. It acts as a spur and an energy from outside to keep this conflict going. And there's various reasons for this. Firstly, it's just financial. You mentioned the armaments being sent to Israel. The United States sends a huge amount of arms to Israel, as does Germany. Germany is provided at the cost of about several $billions, a fleet of submarines armed with, well, believed to be armed with nuclear weapons, although they will never admit it publicly. And of course, they're quite proud about it. I mean, Biden is now saying he doesn't want to send arms anymore probably because he's worried about votes in certain states. But they've been the companies, the military industrial complex, which is basically arms manufacturers, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, these various companies, their business, their very existence, their livelihood is dependent on foreign conflicts, totally dependent. The United States that does not have this is not a market for armaments on its own. The United States is geographically isolated, just like Britain. Britain is as well. Britain is an island. Britain hasn't been invaded since the Norman Conquest almost 1,000 years ago. United States, I don't know if it has been invaded. I know that America fought Britain in the early 19th century. At in the late 19th century, there was a fight with Spain, but generally, the United States has not been invaded or attacked, with exceptions such as 9/11, Pearl Harbor. If it wasn't for foreign interference, all the militaries in the world, all the militaries would have to be downsized to essentially coastal defense forces. Literally, it would be nothing but that. The US Navy and the Coast Guard could be combined, and they would be just like patrol ships along the coast and things like that. Now, no one's going to make any money off that. These companies wouldn't survive. So it's in their interest to stir up and provoke people in foreign fields so they'll simply buy their armaments. And there's several other reasons as well. There's also it's geopolitical strategy. It's what Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was national security advisor to Obama and to Clinton, he called it the grand chessboard. And he wrote this book. He wrote that book about 50 years ago, and he talked about how essentially that he spoke of what is essentially a world government, which is controlling the planet, the entire planet Earth, by moving like in a way like moving pieces on a chessboard. And if you look at the conflict in the Middle East, it appears to be a prime example of that kind of machination. So, for example, it's not just Israel that receives foreign aid; so does Hamas. So do the Palestinians. So the Palestinian Authority has also received a huge amount of foreign aid. In fact, it was Douglas Murray, of all people, who said this in this speech. He did a speech yesterday. He was accepting some kind of award in New York City. He did a speech, and he talked about the tunnel network and the underground bases in Gaza, where Hamas has its headquarters. Because I say Hamas is a very small place. There are no rural areas you can really hide in. So it builds this huge tunnel network. And he joked. He said it's bigger than the London Underground and probably more efficient. And he said it was all paid for with your taxpayers' money. And I thought, Douglas Murray is telling us this, and it's actually true. The Hamas is supported with foreign aid as well, and this goes back a long way. Like I said, it can go back basically to you have to trace it back to the Balfour Agreement, which is over 100 years ago now, which essentially was the first stage in the setting up of the Israeli state. But anyway, do you want to add anything to that, Rin? I can carry on in a minute if you want to say anything.
No, no, not really.
Okay, no problem. Well, the Balfour Agreement was named after Lord Balfour, a British man, it was all part. It sounds just like one of these grand chessboard maneuvers. He said that there should be what he called a Jewish state in the area called Israel. Now, Israel, of course, is mentioned. Israel is the what was at that time the British protectorate of Palestine, which included what is the entire now the territory of the entire state of Israel and much of Syria, the Gaza, the West Bank, etc. This was all under the British protectorate of Palestine. Um, and when he said Jewish, people assumed he meant the Sephardim, that is the indigenous Jewish people of the region, who can be traced back to the basically to the time of Abraham and the Exodus and the Promised Land and things like that. What they called Israel, the Promised Land, and which the God of Israel, had promised the Jewish people after their freedom from slavery, when the Israelites actually escaped from slavery in Egypt and Sumer and places like that. I don't believe they literally parted the Red Sea and walked across. That's probably a bit of artistic license, but Jesus was born into this community. He was born into the Sephardic community in what at the time it was the Roman Empire, Judea, and that was when the Zionist movement began. I think with those words, we're going to have to make this an Alt Tech exclusive. The Zionist movement.
Actually, I think you could say
put that on YouTube?
Zionist. Yeah, I think you can say, Zionist on YouTube, but what YouTube is against would be you talking like Nick Fuentes, especially Mark Colette's. You definitely cannot talk like Mark Colette's on YouTube,
Yeah, no, well, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't sort of
like
say the Zion. He uses words like Zionist, and he puts other words behind that, in front of that, which indicate you're not allowed to say. I think, yeah, sure, fair enough. Because I don't share his views on Israel at all. So I wouldn't say use his language. But
you don't want to use the same language as Mark Collette, because that will probably give you a strike on YouTube. Like, you could say Zionist. That's because it is possible to be a white person and a Zionist. Like, the Zionist is more inclusive, because you could be a white person and a Zionist, a black person and a Zionist. Likewise, you could be a Jewish person, but anti-Zionist. Like, there are Jewish people who are against Zionism, so you cannot collectivize a group of people, because the moment you collectivize a group of people, the moment that YouTube could take you down for anti-Semitism.
That's true. I mean, we mentioned Ilan. We talk about Ilan Pape, and I want to say a bit more about him in a minute. But yeah, a Zionist, as you say, is just someone who believes who supports this move made by the British Empire. T.E. Lawrence, he was a Zionist, I suppose, because he helped kick the Ottoman Empire out of the Holy Land. If you see that brilliant film, Lawrence of Arabia, it's an extraordinary movie. It's very, very good. It talks all about that. So that's true. That's true, Rin. Yeah, it's nothing wrong with saying you're a Zionist. All it means, if you're a Zionist, all it means is if you believe in the idea of a Jewish state in its present form, then you are a Zionist. Yeah, that's right. But at the same time, though, you see, the people playing the grand chess game have also promoted radical Islam. And I mean, there's many examples of this as well. I mean, for example, during the Afghan civil war in the 80s, America very famously backed the Mujahideen. These were anti-Soviet guerrillas. And there's been other examples around the world. And indeed, Hamas was essentially, it began, just like the Islamic State in Iraq, Hamas began as a front for the CIA and Mossad and MI5, intelligence agencies of the West.
Wait, hold on. Hamas was an intelligence agency of the
It was
West.
a front. It was a front because they needed a radical Islamic opposition to the PLO led by Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat was essentially a secular democratic socialist, and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, was it was becoming very successful. Yasser Arafat was a very famous man, if you remember.
No, no, I don't.
All
I
right.
never viewed Hamas, but that's what I heard about Osama bin Laden. That Osama bin Laden was like working for the CIA.
He was absolutely. He was. He was used his wealth actually as essentially to set up a secret business deal with the United States to arm the Mujahideen, so with sophisticated weapons that could take down attack Soviet aircraft and things like that. Yeah, and so I mean I don't have the I don't have the actual document to hand. If I don't want to type, I don't want to keep typing and things like that. But it was I can't remember where I actually saw about this. But it was necessary for there to be a radical Islamist opposition in the Palestinian Authority back in the 70s because Arafat needed some kind of internal dispute to stop him becoming too powerful. So a radical Islamist tendency was set up. This included it goes under the name as Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. Um, and indeed, I mean, then it's no secret that Iran supports a lot of this. Iran has been back in the Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon, for example, and um, and so essentially they set up as part of this grand chessboard. They set up the very conflict we're seeing today.
Hmm. That is very interesting because this is the very first time I heard that Hamas is part of the CIA. Like, but I have heard things like like Netanyahu actually sent Hamas suitcases full of cash. You probably didn't know that.
No,
Oh, you didn't know that. You didn't know that
I did.
Netanyahu
Mm.
who sent like Hamas like suitcases full of cash because like okay and Netanyahu talked about it openly because it's kind of like I think the Times of Israel has covered it that Netanyahu, wanted, okay, Hamas win, so that he could. I think he wanted to like invalidate, the two-state solution. He wanted to like, invalidate the two-state solution
Yeah.
because he was always against it from the very beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a lot of Israelis realize this. This is why a lot of them are against him. This is one of the reasons they're against Netanyahu, and indeed his predecessors have done similar things. That it's occurred to a lot of them that Hamas is actually very useful to the Israeli regime. It's very useful indeed. And the most shocking aspect of this is the work of Efrat Henningsen. I mean, I think I might have shared some of Efrat's things with you. Have you seen her blog?
No.
All right. No, I won't go type in now, but I did. I brought this up on my own live stream about this subject. Efrat Henningsen, she lives in Tel Aviv. She's actually a former intelligence officer in the IDF, and she's talked about something a lot of other people have actually asked the question about how the October the 7th genocide took place, because surely you'd think that the Israeli government would be horrified at what was done. The massive attack against its own country, the terrible extermination of its own people at the places like Be'eri and the various kibbutzim and things like that. But when you look at what actually happened, it's really really strange because Efrat says she was in the IDF, she was in intelligence. She asked the question, how on earth did Hamas manage to pull this off? Because if you look at the official story, the actual Hamas fighters, the first wave of attack was by some men in paragliders, literally flying over the border. They actually were using these paragliders, they're not even aircraft, they're just like a parachute with a propeller. And they flew over the border on these things, and then bulldozers emerged and knocked the fence down. They knocked down this 150-mile fence that surrounds Gaza and from and the border. They bulldozed, not tanks, nothing armed, bulldozers. And what Efrat said is, and she published another article about this after the Iron Dome system, which is is the most sophisticated aerial defense system in the world. Israel's armed forces are the most automated of any. They have a huge number of drones and things like that. Um, it managed to. Iran launched a missile attack on Israel, and over 800 explosive drones were flown towards Israel. Do you know how many got through of those 800? Do you know? Seven. Seven of them managed to get through the Iron Dome defensive system. And if Efrat says this is incredible because we know that when the Iron Dome is working, it's perfectly capable of defending Israel's airspace. Yet she says, why didn't it work on October the 7th when all it had to face was a couple of hundred guys in paragliders and bulldozers? I mean, why did no one shoot at the bulldozers as they were knocking the fence down? What she's saying is basically this whole thing was a false flag. This whole thing was what she calls a lie hop. Let it happen on purpose. It
Yeah,
was. Hmm,
exactly. I've heard that. Okay, October 7th was an inside job because
hmm.
okay, like they were like I think that they were selling their stocks or shorting their stocks, before October 7th happened. So it's kind of a lot like, how did you know to sell your stock?
Yeah.
Before it happened, like how did you know to sell your stock? Like what, it's like that is suspicious.
Yeah, in an ideal circumstance, Netanyahu would be investigated for this. Well, certainly he should be investigated for gross dereliction of duty, as should all the entire command structure of the IDF. But there's a limit to how incompetent you can be by accident, Ren. And a perfect example is from your own history, Pearl Harbor. Now Pearl Harbor is an infamous incident. Apart from 9/11, it's the only time in the last century that the United States has been attacked from a foreign power. The Japanese they sent aircraft carriers right up close to a large number of aircraft carriers in 1942, right up close to Hawaii, and they sent fighter bombers to attack the Pearl Harbor naval base. They sank ships, they bombed offshore facilities, and they killed about 1,100 people. This horrified the American public because you see, FDR, the president, Roosevelt, he had said, it was part of his election manifesto actually, that America would be kept out of any foreign wars. And everyone was worried about this because, of course, a foreign war had just broken out in Europe. Britain was at war with Germany. Germany had invaded Poland and Britain was at war with them. And the last time that happened was in 1915, where America entered the war in Europe, and I think like God knows how many Americans got killed in that war. So everyone was saying we don't want that anymore. I mean, public opinion in the United States before Pearl Harbor was pretty much isolationist and pacifist, and then Pearl Harbor happened, and what Roosevelt did then was he said, "This is a day it will live in infamy." He said, "Well, I didn't want to get involved in this. I didn't want to go to war against Japan, but we have to now, don't we?" But then when you look at it, you realize that there's a guy called Admiral Husband Kimmel. Now he's been used very much as a patsy in this. His name has been dragged through the mud as a fool who allowed Pearl Harbor to happen because he was commandant of the base, and he was the guy who had the final decision on defending the base. Because literally there was literally no reaction at all from the American forces when Pearl Harbor happened. It was literally just, and the reason was there was a stand down order. I don't have all the details now, but Ian R. Crane, the guy I knew, a good friend of mine, he's a friend of Ilan Pape's as well. He did an entire exposure of this. So, yeah, Pearl Harbor allowed the American administration to get involved in World War II. It gave them the perfect excuse. It's flipped public opinion on its head overnight and made Americans bloodthirsty and desperate for revenge. See what I mean? So this is very similar to what was done, I think, last year in Israel. You got another? Oh, I'll share this screen. You got another screen to share, or is this the one we did before? Oh, what's this? All right, Ren, explain what this is.
That it was so we were talking about like Israel investigates possible trading knowledge ahead of October. October 7th Hamas attack. It's like, how would people know? How would anybody know before it happens?
Yeah,
It's just quite weird.
very. It's you see, the same thing happened with 9/11. If you remember, there was there was it's actually an investigation by is it the SEC? They actually were looking into people who took out put options, essentially a bet on the stock market before that certain airlines their stock value would crash. The airlines that were the planes used on 9/11. So somebody knew, a lot of people must have known that something was going to happen.
Yeah, because if you are betting against the stock before it happens, a day it would be like days. Like, oh, like here's a different headline that I found. It's like they sold it days before it happened. It's like,
Mm,
so it's kind of like if you did it days before it happened, you must have known something. Like, wait a minute, here's a different headline.
yeah. All right. This is someone bet against Israeli stock. Right. In the days before the Hamas October the 7th attack. Isn't that incredible, Rin? Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, it's like, how did you know about? It's like it seems like they knew about it before it happened, because it's kind of a lot. Like, if it was a real surprise, then you wouldn't, protect your stock. You would just go bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, we can actually. I'm sure these people can be named. I mean, firstly, I'm happy to name Larry Silverstein. He's the former owner of the World Trade Center, because you see, he had an insurance policy taken out on the site, but it did not include terrorist action. And then, literally a couple of weeks before September 11th, 2001, he went back to his insurance broker and he says, "I want to increase my premiums in exchange for an additional clause that includes a payout as a result of terrorist action." And they
Yeah.
agreed. So he had a new policy. He had a new insurance policy on the World Trade Center. And then, lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, an attack happened, and the WTC was destroyed, and he made about 10 times as much money as he would have otherwise. And I'm sure there are similar things connected to this. I mean, what about Netanyahu himself? Does he have stocks and shares?
I don't know, but it
Yeah.
is interesting. 5 days before the deadliest attack in Israel's history, a warning may have appeared on stock exchanges. A study by researchers from Columbia University and NYU called Trading on a Terror suggests that a trader may have been aware of the coming attack. Bets against the Israeli economy and walked away with a profit by short selling on the U.S. and Israeli stock exchanges. Short selling is a trade. Oh well, never mind.
But yeah, and we get the point, don't we? I mean, I'm sure everyone gets the point here. I mean, there's other examples I could talk about, like yeah, this is extraordinary. Like, for example, again, it was Douglas Murray's speech yesterday. He did this speech. It's worth watching, actually, despite the fact that he himself is so narrow-minded and one-sided. It's amazing what I think he gives away information without realizing how incriminating it is. He talked about a guy he had met. This was a family. This was a family of a young man who had the moment the massacre happened on October the 7th. He didn't wait for orders because, as I said, Israel has a citizen army. He grabbed his gun, he got in his car, and he drove south towards the border, towards Be'eri, where the music festival had been, and the kibbutzim, where there'd been these terrible attacks. And he received mobile phone calls from his commanders ordering him to return. But he says, "I'm not returning. I'm going to keep going. I'm disobeying this order. I'm going to keep going." And they said, "You'll face a charge of mutiny." He says, "I don't care." And he drove all the way down to Be'eri, and he basically carried out a one-man attack against the Hamas invaders. He eventually got killed. But why was it? Why was he doing that? Why was the IDF not doing that? It took, like, I can't remember how long it was. I think it was 2 or 3 days before an IDF force actually moved into the south. And it's not like they had to deploy to the other side of the world on an aircraft carrier or with long distance aircraft. This was like about it was 50 or 60 miles from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I mean, even closer to Jerusalem. They could have just got in a few lorries and they could have sent the entire force down there in just a few lorries. So why? Why was there no immediate response by the IDF?
Yeah, I mean, now you're asking the right questions. Like you ask questions that nobody else asks. Like
Yeah, I'm sure there are a few people asking them. Efrat Henriksen asked these questions. Yeah, but I don't. I wonder how many other Israelis are. I mean, I'm sure there must be lots of them.
Yeah. Well, thousands of Israelis wants Netanyahu to stand up. Can I go use the bathroom right quick?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll rabbit on for a little bit while you're doing that, Ren. Yeah. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with what David Icke calls a movie. The difference between what's really going on in the world and what the public is presented with, the gulf is so vast, it is literally the difference between reality and fiction. We have falsified news stories on a vast scale. We have the most horrible acts of murder and violence being done to innocent people for fake reasons with fake origins. We've got to ask why this is. It's been going on since time immemorial, and it has to stop. It has to stop. I mean, I really take my hat off to people like Ilan Pape and like Efrat Henriksen, who have really exposed this. I'm sure they get in a lot of trouble for this. I'm sure they do. I mean, Efrat, I know, is self-employed and she makes a lot of money from Bitcoin. I mean, this is how she started out, as a Bitcoin millionairess. But, other people may be military officers, or they may be doctors, or they may be civil servants, and they may be other people taking the state shilling, like I did, the state shekel in their case. I took the king's shilling for 23 years. When I start just simply expressing opinions and saying I was a hospital porter,
I'm
I was out
back.
on my own. Okay. I've just been telling everyone about how that we're living in a world in which the most horrible things happen, extreme acts of violence and murder and torture against innocent individuals for fake reasons with fake origins, things that could be prevented, or even things that are fabricated. It's almost like we're farm animals, and we're faced with. I mean, it's almost like being a farm animal and having to deal with the slaughterhouse. It's not even a war. It's like it is literally mass murder, and then we're given a fake story about how it happens, and all the origins. We're given a fake story about how it happens, and then we'll be told this particular action needs to be taken in retaliation, and it is exactly what suits the government. And when you look at it deeper, you'll find it's the government that set up the whole situation in the first place. This has to stop. We can't go on like this as a species, as a people.
Oh, wait a minute. Can you repeat those last two sentences?
Yeah, sure. I was just saying that we have these terrible acts of violence being done against people, mass murder and torture and abuse on an enormous scale. And in many countries, not just in this particular, in the Israel, in Gaza. And when you look into how it happened, how it started, it's very often it's engineered. It's engineered by a force that controls both sides in that particular conflict, and then we're told that there has to be a solution to this particular problem, and public opinion will have been manipulated by the very action that both the people who control both sides have engineered, and the solution happens to be exactly what advances their policy. And you see this again and again all over the world in different situations. I gave you the example of Pearl Harbor. This is another. There was the bombing of the USS Maine, which I mentioned, the Spanish-American War in the late 19th century. Oh, it really has to. This can't go on. This has to stop.
So it's like there's going to be like a person that like he'll be engineered by the government to give the government more power.
Yes. And this has given Netanyahu far more authority over his people and his country. When it was waning, his authority was waning. His career was in jeopardy until this moment. And now
Yeah,
he suddenly has this lifeline, which has been given to him by the blood of his own people.
yeah, that's true. That's true. That makes me think of a book called Friendly Fascism, and I've heard about it because
Yeah.
what's his name, Syphilis 55, or And he actually defended right wingers. Like I know that when people will hear fascism, they're thinking, "Oh no, it's insults the right," but he actually defended the right from Hillary Clinton because he was like against Hillary Clinton calling right wingers a basket full of deplorables because
Yeah,
it's like if she became president, I mean, imagine a president that admits that she hates half the country.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
like it's like if somebody calls you a basket full of deplorable, then that is like your own president saying that she hates your guts. I mean, that is
Mm,
in a parallel universe, well, where Hillary Clinton becomes the next president. You know what I'm saying? You know,
mm. I remember that video. You did send me a video. I watched it a couple of weeks ago. We were originally going to talk about that. I mean, I'm sure we can talk about that again in more detail in a future video. Absolutely. Um, but it was Morgoth's review. He did a very, he's been banned from YouTube, but he's on Alt Tech. He did a very good video the other day. It was called it was called the not the banality of evil. It was I'm going to find this one because I want to tell you the title of it because it was really really perceptive. It's talking specifically about the British situation, but it would apply to any country probably. And he said basically that we're talking about a nation in which the state is essentially at war with the people. The state has actually has now formally designated its own population as its enemy, and it uses phrases like uh, threats to democracy and things like that. But what they mean is they don't mean threats to our democracy; it's threats to what they call their democracy, which is I'll just get the channel up here. Um, Basically, people disagreeing with them. They're saying disagreement is now a problem that has to be contained. It's no longer something to. There's no discussion anymore. It is disagreement is now a problem for the state that has to be dealt with as you would deal with an enemy, and it's called the crisis of Britain's managerial state. And I won't share screen, otherwise again they won't tolerate this on YouTube because he's been banned from YouTube. But you can find it on his channel on Altec. And it was really really good what he says. He talks about the various policies that have been brought in to curtail free speech and to create a consent. The engineering of consent. Have you heard that phrase before? The engineering of consent.
maybe,
It's
but I
another
don't
way of saying
remember.
it's another way of saying Hasbara.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It seems like a sort of type of thing that probably would be that AMCAPs would talk about, like, because there is this AMCAP meme that is kind of a lot like if you give up your freedoms during the times of crisis, then your government will create times of crisis,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. If you exactly they and we what we're having we have a tidal set. We seem to be engaged in some kind of general trend. I mean, of course, there were lots of progressions and lots of regressions in this trend in this tidal set. But generally speaking, the geopolitical trend is towards more authoritarianism and internationalism.
Yeah, it seems like
Absolutely no doubt.
Yeah, it's like it feels like it's just more authoritarianism. And at first in 2000 and 16, I would blame the left. I made numerous videos complaining about the left, but now it seems like it's coming from the right too. Because at first, like again with Anita Sarkeesian, it would be like everything's racist, everything's sexist, everything's homophobic and transphobic. You got to point it all out, and we should lose more of our First Amendment rights. We have the right to free speech, but we had to lose more of um, our First Amendment rights because people want to be woke. But now with the right wingers, literally everything's anti-Semitic, and you got to point it all out. And it's like you have right wingers celebrating, let college kids in colleges, and people would be not a part of the college; they would be outside of the college. They don't even attend the college, but they would be, using weapons against college students. And I can't help but to think, what if that was your kid? Are you saying that you would be okay, that if you had a left-wing kid, that you would be okay with your kid being covered in blood just because they disagree with you on foreign policy?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. It's the uh, we the threat of various danger, the power of nightmares, to quote Adam Curtis, is now the principal tool of political propaganda in almost any country now. We know that people don't trust politicians to deliver us a better world anymore, because we know they won't. They've had their chance to do that many times. Ever since the end of World War II, people believed that we were entering some kind of golden age, which never came. So now their authority comes from their promise to protect us from nightmares, to rescue us from dangers that we don't understand and only they can save us from. And we're seeing that now. I I don't. I mean, I'm like yourself. I've been very critical of the left. I still am. I mean, when they say things like October the 7th was a legitimate act of retaliation, and that all Israelis should be kicked out from the river to the sea. That they should be removed, and Palestine should be essentially a non-Jewish entity. And think, because some of them do say this, I oppose that enormously. But I'm not a fan of the right either, because I agree with your position on the right as well. They're essentially acting like, well, what they have been recruited to the Hasbara ministry. They really are. And they are essentially seeing things through a 100% Israeli positive lens.
Well, to be fair, Israel would pay even, Americans to, like, they would actually pay, because, oh, I actually sent you a link. Did you check my DMs, the DMs I
Yes.
sent you? Like, it's the one from Instagram where, there's like a black guy, in a bus saying that he got paid like $50,000 to be
Yes.
pro-Israel at a
Yes.
protest.
This is
He got
Rima
paid
Rima, yeah.
Yeah, he got paid $50,000 to be pro-Israel in a protest. It's like, what?
Yeah. They will do that. I mean, it doesn't surprise when I saw that. It didn't surprise me, because essentially this happens here. I mean, believe it or not, oh, have I frozen? I'm still there. No. Um, even in something as benign as a political campaign for parliament, I don't know if it's the same in the United States. It probably is, actually. When you see these political rallies, and there's loads and loads of people surrounding the candidate, waving banners saying, so and so for president, so and so for Congress. You ever seen that? Because we have that in this country. Those people are not often. Very often they're not members of the party, and they're not formally supporting the candidate. They are actors paid to do it. They are kind of rent a supporter.
Mm.
So it's no surprise the same thing happens. And you also sent me a DM about Al Jazeera, because Al Jazeera's been banned, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, they've been banned from Israel.
All right. Have they been banned from the US yet, or from? I don't know if they've been banned from the UK, but they've been banned from Israel. So Israelis can't access Al Jazeera now because Al Jazeera is critical, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, it's like I sent you a tweets about a guy who is an Israeli Jew. He is an Israeli Jew, but he got detained by
Ilan
the
Pape, yeah.
FBI. Oh, he got detained by the FBI at an airport because he
Mm,
wrote a book.
yeah.
It's really true. Like, he was born in Israel, his ethnicity is Jew, but the FBI came to get him, and they're like, "How many Muslim friends do you have? And do you work for Hamas?" And it's like, this guy is Jewish, and this, like, the reason why the FBI came after him is because he wrote a book, and that is,
Mm,
in a way, it's kind of scary. It's kind of terrifying. It's kind of like, like, what about our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech? America is supposed to be the freest country on earth. We frequently brag about it. I mean, we Americans, we love bragging about we're the freest country on earth. But a guy got detained by the FBI just
mm.
for writing a book.
Yeah, it reminds me very much of the post 9/11 world when you remember people, the FBI were basically rounding people up who for almost all no excuse at all for expressing opinions that opposed to the current policy, the call for military action on the other side of the world as a result of the 9/11 attack. Ilan Pape has been around for a long time. I mentioned Ian R. Crane earlier. Ian was a friend of Elan's, and Ian died actually a couple of years ago. But he mentions the books. I mean, Ilan Pape has written a number of books, most famously The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine and The Idea of Israel, A History of Power and Knowledge. But there's one called The Wandering Who, which goes into more general ideas about Judaism, about the nature of Judaism and the Jewish diaspora, the location of Jews around the world, because Jews, the number of Jews actually who live in the Holy Land, originally who are indigenous to Holy Land, is only a small minority. The Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews. Like I said, Jesus's people were Sephardic Jews, and he says that basically he talks about, I can't remember all the details because I did read the book a long time ago, and he talked about the attitudes within the Jewish diaspora towards the Holy Land, and he's a big opponent of the Balfour Declaration, and he's not alone, you see, because he's treated. I mean, Douglas Murray talks about these people. He talks about Norman Finkelstein, and he called Norman Finkelstein a psychopath, and he says, "Oh, he talks. I can't believe there are such evil people and things like that." And no doubt he would regard Ilan Pape the same way. But all he's attacking, all that Douglas Murray was attacking, are people who represent a very, very broad and very, very popular position of opinion in Israel. Like you said, he is a Jew. This man is a Jew. He's Israeli. Yet he's been portrayed as some kind of foreign infiltrator of dark propaganda, which is nonsense. Anyway, you want to read this, Ren? Do you want to read from us?
Yeah, because it's really short. Did you know that 70-year-old professor of history are threatening America's national security? I arrived on Monday at Detroit's airport on second for a 2-hour investigation by the FBI, and my phone was taken as well. The two men team were not to be civil rude, or should I say, but their questions were really out of this world. Am I a Hamas supporter? Do I regard the Israeli actions in Gaza a genocide? What is the solution to the conflict? Seriously, this is what they ask. Who are my Arab and Muslim friends in America? That is just what? How long do I know them? What kind of relationship I have with them? It is some cases I sent them to my books, and in some cases I answered. Um, how do you pronounce that word?
I can't see it properly. Let's have a look. You did send it me earlier. Sorry, I'll go to the
Laconically. It looks like laconically.
apologies, Ren. I'll just go to the thing you sent me here. This
I guess, I guess you
Ilan
pronounced
Pape.
it. I guess it's pronounced laconically.
So
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
I can't even with my glasses on. I can't actually see very well. Yeah,
I,
laconically,
I,
yes, I answered. I don't know exactly what that means laconically, but
Yeah, electronically, yes and no. I was quite exhausted after 8-hour flights, but this is parts of the idea. They had long phone conversations with someone, the Israelis, and after copying everything on my phone allowed me to answer. I know many of you have fared far worse experience, but after France and Germany did not entry to the Register of Glasgow University for being a Palestinian. God, know what will happen next. The good news is actions like this by the USA or European countries have taken under pressure from the pro-Israel lobby or Israel's self-smell of sheer panic and desperation in reaction to Israel's becoming very centralized states with all the implications of such a status.
Right. Well, I think he's. I don't. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, I hope that there is some sort of perception of what's going on here, and I believe this whole system needs to be made pariah of everything that's been happening here. But it is extraordinary when you think about it, and it gives you I think it gives you a perception of exactly how powerful this propaganda is, the Hasbara, this propaganda, and I'm not certainly I'm not a supporter of the Palestinians, but it's pretty clear they don't have that kind of reach with foreign powers right now, and that's intentional. That's all part of the chessboard. So Israel really has much more influence right now on like foreign authorities than the other side do, which is intentional. That could change, but if we're getting people basically being arrested, like mentioned, and or banned from countries like the rector of Glasgow University because of expressing opinions. This is the ultimate in cancel culture, and these. It's interesting that these law enforcement agencies like the FBI, and we see the same thing with the police in this country. Real crimes are going on right now. I mean, I made a joke on Twitter about the possibility of the drug shipment coming in, which they're just ignoring because they're too busy questioning Ilan Pape. That's actually true. That actually does happen. Real crimes go, completely and utterly unmolested by the forces of law enforcement because they're too busy doing stupid things like this and wasting people's time and basically grilling innocent people. So if you are a victim of crime and say you're a member of your family dies because of that of an overdose because of that drug import, you should blame the FBI for arresting Ilan Pape.
And I sent you like a Wikipedia edition. I'm not even going to read the whole thing, but it's just like a quickie background of, Elon Pape for the people who don't know who he is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've read. I know. I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, but not
And
everybody does.
yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I sent it to you. You haven't.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with this. He's an Israeli. Um, he's an Israeli historian and political scientist who is part of. As I said, contrary to popular belief, he's not unusual in Israel, but he's a massive critic of his country's history and government.
Hmm.
He really like Norman Finkelstein and other people. He's Jewish. He's Israeli. He's an Ashkenazi, but he is not united behind the government in their foreign policy. And he's one of many. Efrat Henriksen's another, and but they are portrayed as literally as pariahs, as sort of outsiders, rather than uh, a quite acceptable and mainstream political position within Israel. So,
Oh yeah, did you know that? Okay, Natalie Portman. She is an Israeli Jew. Like Natalie Portman is an Israeli Ashkenazi Jew. But okay, Netanyahu or like the Israeli parliament threatened to take away her Israeli citizenship for criticizing, Israel. All she did was criticize Israel, and they threatened to take away her Israeli citizenship. Like I could criticize America. There are people who could get away with saying like death to America. Like there are people in America that would say death to America. You could get away with saying it. But it's like now Natalie Portman, she's an Israeli Jew, and she had like a mild criticism of Israel. And she for the longest time, defended Israel. But the moment she criticized it, the Israeli parliament threatened to take away her citizenship.
that is an extra. That's worse than what was done to Ilan Pape, because that's incredible. Because I'm probably they're picking on her firstly because she doesn't live in Israel; she lives in the United States and has dual citizenship. Secondly, she's a very famous person, and so anything she says will probably have more influence than anything an ordinary person will say. But they're simply the idea that they could deprive her of her citizenship because of that. It means that, I mean, contrary to Israel, therefore being the only democracy in the Middle East, it's obvious that Israel is not a democracy if you can be stripped of your citizenship for questioning it. No doubt. I don't know if if Efrat suffered the same thing, I mean, I don't know if they may not be able to because Efrat might be only citizens of that one country, and they can't make her stateless. But yeah, it's really removal of citizenship. I think only comes you have to be convicted in this country. I think you have to be convicted of treason. I know there was a young woman who I forgot her name now. She had her citizenship withdrawn because she was a dual citizen of another country. I think it was Pakistan. Oh, you want to put that up for you? There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was getting to the part that I wanted to talk about. Okay,
Sure.
hold on. Okay, so Natalie Portman turning down a visit to Israel in protest is not business as usual, and Israeli politicians are not treating it as such. Orion Hassan, a member of Israel's parliament from Netanyahu's Likud party, called for Portman's Israeli citizenship to be stripped.
Oh God. That's. I hope he doesn't get away with it because I mean, if he does, I'm she'll kick up. I'm sure she will like kick up and say, "Well, there you go. There's not democracy in Israel if they're doing this to sit their own people." Well, as you know, they're quite willing to throw their people to the wolves, literally,
Yeah,
for
it's
a
like
sake of policy.
it's like she just criticized Israel, and it's not just anybody. It is from Netanyahu's Likud party called for Portman's Israeli citizenship to be stripped. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, if they're willing to throw their own people, their own citizens, into the hands of torturers and murderers in vast numbers, and then come on TV and smile and say we need to do something about this, then I'm sure they wouldn't feel any qualms about what's it word disenfranchising a Hollywood star from their country and exiling her from their country. So that yeah, I mean it's a really horrible thing. I hope she doesn't back down. I hope she sticks by her guns. Definitely, not literally. Not just Let's have a look at my notes because I think I've finished, Ren. I don't think I've anything else to add.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been through all my points.
yeah, there are Jewish people who are critical of Israel. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Bet Selam or Breaking the Silence. Um,
Breaking the silence I've heard of. Yeah.
have you heard of Bet Selam?
No.
Yeah, because I don't know if you discussed this with your audience. Like, you probably have a bigger audience than me, and you also have like a radio thing that you do.
Yeah, I've done several live streams. I've done 2 live streams on this subject of the Israel war. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will screen share Bet Selam then. Yeah. Or I clicked the wrong button.
No worries.
Let's see.
I see it right. This is apartheid, the regime of Jewish supremacy. Right, you are. You want to read that, Ren?
Oh, this is really long. I don't really want to read
Okay.
anything this long because this is, uh, well, I mean, it's a long read, but it's basically okay. Okay, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territory.
Hasbara, in other words.
No, 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 no. This is a human rights group.
All right. No,
Yes,
sorry. Carry on. Yeah.
yeah, but Selam, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, strives for a future in which human rights, liberty, and equality are guaranteed to all people, Palestinian and Jewish alike, living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Such a future will only be possible when the Israeli occupation and apartheid regime end. That is the future. We are working towards B'Tselem in Hebrew, literally in the image of the name chosen for the organization by the late member of Kesnet Yassi Sharid is an allusion to Genesis 1 27. And God created humankind in his image. In the image of God did he create them. The name expressed the universal and Jewish moral edict to respect and uphold the human rights of all people.
Yeah, that sounds very noble. It really, really does. Yeah, and I'd be. This is what I hope will happen. I hope there will be some kind of what's the word? There will be some kind of solution to this, in which there will be a peace, a détente between the peoples of different cultures in that region. There's no need for any state to be disbanded or anything like that. Maybe a two-state solution would work once the solution it's allowed to work, and the various global intelligence agencies don't keep spoiling it and keep ruining it. So that's what I hope for, Ren. I hope for a future in which there's this violence comes to an end. There have been peaceful times in the Holy Land. There have been periods in history, not always, but there have been periods in history in which the Jews and the Muslims of the region have come to an agreement. It
Yeah,
was
but
actually it was actually a Palestinian protester who told me this. Actually, he was a guy on Cali Road near where I live. They had a protest, and he was talking about the time before the Balfour Agreement. He said when they described the Sephardim as their brothers, the Muslims. They said that the Sephardim were like our brothers. We even live in the same communities. We used
yeah,
to before 1946.
yeah, exactly. Because it's like the Palestinians got along with the Sephardic Jews who also stayed in the region, but there weren't really that many Jews in Palestine. Palestine had like a 5% Jewish population. They got along well with the Muslims. They got along
Hmm.
very well with the Muslims, but it was only 5% Jewish, and that's the
Hmm.
reason why they were also against, Jewish people having, so much of that land. It's because it's like Jewish people were only like 5%, but it went from like 5% to like, it's exploded, with
Hmm.
Jewish people from all over the world, like Jewish people from Germany, Jewish people from Russia coming to Israel, and now it's like Jewish people from America all coming to Israel, and it's like it displaces the Palestinians that live there, so they lose more and more of their land. So at first that it would be like 95% Muslim and 5% Jews, but the Jews got along very well with the Muslims. But then it's like, they were 5% of the population, but they get half the land, so Muslims end up getting angry. And then it's kind of a lot like Muslims, which were like, I don't know, like 2 million of the population. Like the population was really high, like 2 million or something. They get squished into, small areas of land, while, um, Jewish people who are a minority gets greater areas of the land.
Hmm. Well, most of the Israelis are Ashkenazi, so their ancestry lies in Europe, in Central Europe, and of course through the extended diaspora into North America. Yeah, and you mentioned Russia as well. In fact, Russian Jews are known as refuseniks, the Russian Ashkenazi, because the Soviet regime used to refuse them the permission to emigrate to Israel. So exactly. And you mentioned the Nabkar, and indeed Alan Pape wrote about this. When the Balfour Declaration was introduced, a lot of the Palestinians were basically turfed out of their own homes and moved like 20, 30, 40 miles away into new areas where they were just basically given shanties to live in. Um,
Mhm.
and Pape mentions this, and that was because of the introduction of the Balfour Agreement. So, yeah, I do hope a time will come when this will generally. I hope a time will come when people will see through this. People on all the people. It mentions here 14 million people who live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea will understand exactly how they have been used as chess pieces on the grand chessboard, and they can then, once they've done that, they can free themselves from the very forces that keep them at each other's throats. No one else need nobody. No one, no. I'm not in favour of Israel being disbanded. Israel can still exist, as far as I'm concerned. I believe Israel has a right to exist, but I don't believe it has a right to exist with the government it has now, any more than any other country has a right to have a government it does now. I don't believe Britain has a right to exist with the globalists running it at the moment. So that has to change. We'll never be free and we'll never be at peace until that changes. Sure, we'll have disagreements. I think there's always going to be conflict between people. But if you just look at history and look at the various wars that have broken out, how few of them have emerged naturally? They've emerged, they've happened, but they're a tiny minority of all the wars that have happened throughout history, especially the big ones. So my hope is, and I ask people watching this, just take a step back, look at it again, think more clearly. Look at Ilan Pape, read what these people have said, read what if Efrat Henningsen has done. Look at what Ian R. Crane, especially Ian R. Crane, I recommend, and that way we can maybe awaken from this nightmare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you want to carry on? I was sort of finishing there, Rin. I'm going to have to finish in a minute, but
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah.
anything more you want to add?
Yeah, yeah, the way you said it, it sounded like a finishing statement. It sounded like you made a finishing statement, but yeah,
It was. But if you want to add more, go ahead. But I will have to sort of go in a minute, in maybe 5 to 10 minutes. But if you want to add any more, Rin, go ahead. Sorry, I was getting slightly ahead of you there.
no, there's like nothing I could really add it to it because I did agree with everything that you had to say.
Oh, thanks. We do agree sometimes, you see, even if we don't both believe in UFOs.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot like this live stream has went very smoothly, swimmingly. Like, like none of us, called, each other an ist or an obig, or, like, you didn't call
Mm.
me anti-Semitic, not even once.
Exactly. You've been very open-minded, actually, because because you seem quite open to these new ideas that I've been talking about, which is good, and I've been trying to see things through your point of view as well.
Yeah, and I'm just glad that I could have a conversation with somebody who's not going to call me an anti-Semite. That
Yeah,
is really
likewise,
nice. Yeah.
likewise, yeah. All right, well, I've sort of finished now, so do you think it's a good time to finish?
Yeah, this is good. Like we didn't really disagree. Like, I thought that there would be more disagreements, but we
Hmm.
actually barely disagreed with each other. No, that, but you taught me many new things. You taught me a lot. Like, like I didn't even know that Hamas was part of the CIA. Like, I didn't know that
Hmm.
until now.
Okay, I'll find the details because I was actually looking this up the other day. I'll find the details about where it all comes from, and I'll send you the links over about where this comes from. But I just want to say thank you, Ren, for having this conversation. I mean, this is not me being the host or you being the host. It's sort of both, really. So this video will be available on both our channels. So
Yeah, I think we kept it clean. I don't think we said anything that could get a strike, because we're not, complaining about Jewish people. We're criticizing the Israeli governments. And there is a difference between criticizing Jewish people and criticizing the Israeli governments. Like, it's kind of like I'm quite sure that there are plenty of foreigners that criticize the American government. Like, there are people from England in Australia that love criticizing the American government. So it's like if people from all these foreign lands could criticize my governments, why can't I criticize, the government from people from a foreign land?
exactly, yeah. I think we've done a good job of keeping this SFYT. So I think we can both probably put this on our YouTube channel as well as our alt tech ones. And but just want to say thank you very much, and it's been good to talk to you again, Rin. Much appreciated.
Yeah, it's been really good talking to you. Like this has been so refreshing. There has been like no name calling, no, insults. No, you drank the woke Kool-Aid. No,
Yeah,
you're a communist now. Like, no, you're a communist now.
that'll be the day.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
just so refreshing that I could have a civilized conversation. It feels so refreshing. It's like it can be done. It
Mm.
can be done. You
Yeah,
can have a civilized conversation. You can have a civilized disagreements with somebody. And I mean, we actually mostly agreed, really. And you taught me a lot of new things, like a
mm.
lot of things. You said I was hearing for the very first time. I really didn't know
Okay.
any of these things.
That's great, Rin, and likewise, I think we agreed more than I expected, and that's cool. And I want to say, everyone who's watched, thank you very much. Subscribe to Rin's channel and mine, and oh yeah, don't forget, buy my book, Roswell Rising: A Novel of Disclosure. £10 in all good bookshops now. There we go.
Oh,
Shameless plug over.
I've been thinking about writing a book, but it's like, I don't really have. I think I would need an editor. I was saying I think I would
Yeah,
need
I
an
mean,
editor.
you can get editors for, I mean, quite cheaply. I mean, it's good to get one. But yeah, that's a good idea, Rin. I mean, right, I'd be interested to read your book. Yeah, and so thanks very much appreciated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thank you, Rin.
All right, bye bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye. And so that was another very interesting conversation there between me and Rin Michaelis. Now, that conversation was recorded quite a long time ago, about 3 weeks ago. The original is on her channel if you want to go and watch it. Um, I suppose we may not have resolved all the issues that we maybe could have addressed. I mean, the issue of genocide is one that I want to discuss, which I never really got the chance to delve into with Rin properly. She said that that what was going on there was indeed genocide. It was as defined by, as a United Nations Convention on Genocide, for example. Now, the problem I have there is so much propaganda in this situation. It reminds me of the Russia-Ukraine situation that I am not even sure what to believe now. I know that there are people in the Netanyahu regime who have stated quite clearly that they wish to pursue a policy of genocide against the Palestinians. They have said that. Yet there are people in the Palestinian Authority who say exactly the same thing about the Israelis. So, what's right or wrong? That's the problem. And as Rin and I explained, the moment you express any kind of sentiment, you essentially are cast into the fray, and it's got to the point where it's like trying to have some kind of a civilized discussion in the middle of a barroom brawl. I don't know how this issue can be resolved. It's difficult to know because neither side seems neither side, I would say, at the moment is in a position to negotiate, and that's understandable considering what's happened since October the 7th. It is understandable what's happened as a result of that. But I mean, if it's true that each side is convinced the other is trying to exterminate them, how do you resolve that? You have to convince one side or the other that they're not going to do that. And that hasn't been very successful so far. It's a bit like the nuclear arms race. The moment you drop your guard, you leave yourself open to the most terrible danger from the other side. So, on the other hand, though, it's impossible for the other side to even begin taking the steps towards, you know, peace and removing that policy unless you're willing to do the same. So someone has to make the first move. I don't know. All I know is that I haven't picked a side in this. Well, I have picked a side, and as I said to Rin, the side I am on is the side of all the innocent people caught up in this conflict, whether Israeli or Palestinian. I'm on their side. I support them and I sympathise with them, and I don't want them to any of them on either side to come to any further harm. And I hope a time will come when that will be possible. Well, thanks for watching Panmo TV. There'll be another one coming soon. I've had some more videos banned. Of course, I'm going to have to make a video about that, as always. Um, In the meantime, thank you very much for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.